Hey fellow YouTubers, this is N0AGI. I'm here to do a short video on my KANTRONICS KPC TNCs. This one is a 9612 plus, and this is on my Shack to Go number 2, and that's the KPC 3 plus. One of the common problems, at least the ones that I have faced with these TNCs, and not just with these TNCs, but just about any TNC in general, is the configurations need to be updated or need to be edited on a regular basis. I think one of the scenarios is, for example, I have this 9612 plus hooked up to my FT2900 for the 2-meter packet radio, which includes for things like RMS WinLink gateway setup from a gateway node standpoint setup, and it's also my POXAG TNC to do my pagers on 2 meters, and this TNC is also hooked up to the 9600 baud rate to my Kenwood D710GA in the back. So the TNC kind of goes through a couple of what I call operations, sysops. One is for the packet node for WinLink and Digipeater standpoint on that frequency, and the other is the POXAG through the Kenwood D710. So there are scenarios where I have lost the settings on the TNC, meaning the TNC call sign goes bad, so I'll have to re-enter the call sign, or the Digipeater call sign, the Digipeater settings, my PBBS settings, or the POXAG settings. All of those settings tend to get lost, at least in my experience, the whatever 2 years or so that I've used this TNC. It's not just with KANTRONICS. It's not a KANTRONICS problem. It's more of a problem where multiple software components are trying to go through the node, and the software tries to override some of these settings. And at some point in time, there might be some sort of a conflict that erases some of the TNC settings and configuration. So thus far, what I've been doing is manually going into each of my TNCs through terminal app, like for example the MOBA Xterm terminal, just manually logging into the TNCs and entering data on keyboard on a regular basis, or whenever there is a problem that I encounter. And honestly, to be very candid, that's been extremely painful, because for example, the 9612 plus, and I'll show you in a minute the kind of settings I have. There are at least 40 or 60 lines of settings that I will have to re-enter if in case there happens to be some configuration loss, and that's been a challenge for me. And it's not as bad as on the KPC 3 plus as it is on the 9612 plus, and it's been a challenge, to say the least. So what I've done is I've written a tool in C#, and I'm writing a similar tool for Raspberry Pi or Linux-based systems. My goal is to have a similar tool available for Raspberry Pi, so I can manage this through my Raspberry Pi cluster over here. If you haven't seen that video earlier, please do so. But anyway, so I've written a tool for Windows-based system in C#, and I'll quickly demo that to you. And I'm looking at building a similar tool, only a command line tool for Linux and Raspberry Pi based systems. So the purpose of the tool is really to say, hey, here's my master template of the configuration file. and then automatically upload it to the TNC, making sure some settings go through a reset. So for example, if you set, let's say, if you set the number of PBBS users or max user setting, that setting requires the TNC to reset or reboot. So there are a whole bunch of these settings that require a reboot. So your configuration file can have a flag in there that says whether you want to wait till the TNC reboots before applying the next configuration in the template. So it's nothing more than a tool to allow me to do a batch processing upload of these configurations and settings into the TNC. It just makes my life a lot easier. So I'm assuming others have others are also facing similar challenges or similar requirements. If you do, then feel free to download my tool, and it's free. You can download it and use it to whatever you prefer. Currently, the tool has been tested using my KPC TNCs. It hasn't been tested in any other TNCs yet. But anyway, so let me quickly show you the config file, and I'll do a quick demo, and we'll go from there. I'll be right back. Okay, so here I'm logged into my KANTRONICS 9612 Plus TNC with my MOBA Xterm terminal. But anyway, so if you go to my display, or rather, let me see, display, these are all the several settings in the system. And as you can tell, let me see if I can scroll up, and you can tell there's several settings. That this one here is for the Twin Cities, PBBS or micro capacity BBS mini mailbox sort of a server. And there's also, let's see if I can go up here a little bit, or if I can scroll up. And then there's the POXAG settings there. There's also other things like, for example, the beacons. If I can scroll properly. So here's the beacons for the different services. And like I said, there's also a digipeater level of settings. So there's about whatever 60 or so line items that I'll have to set every time something goes bad. And that takes just a ton of time, and which is terribly painful. So what I've done is to automate this whole thing. If in case the settings go bad, how do I get this back up and running? And so I think one way to do that is to maybe demonstrate to you. Let's say I do a factory reset. Okay, let's restore defaults. Let's try that. Restore defaults. Okay, so now I'm restoring the TNC to factory defaults, and basically it's going to refresh itself. So let's see that, and so I'm just going to do a basic first time install. So everything is set to factory default now. I'll do N0AGI. Let's say in lowercase. Okay, all right, so there's nothing going on here. If I go display, I mean that's and the terminal int term, and let's say display, most of these settings are set to default now, so it's clean slate. Okay, so if I were to get this up and running with my settings, it takes me anywhere between 15 to 20 minutes, or maybe half hour sometimes. Instead of that, I rather automate this whole thing. All right, so I built this tool here. I call it KPC TNC Config Manager, and I know it's hooked up to my port number 12. So I'll select port number 12. I have this config file, my template, if you will, stored up in my system. So let me first open that, and then you can see how the template looks like. All right, so this is the template. It's just a standard text file, nothing fancy here. So basically these are all the commands I'd like to set up in my TNC. As you can tell, there's about 65 line items, and some of them require reset on the TNC when you apply them. and some of them just go through, right? So as you can tell, there's several of these settings in here. So basically, the first is the command, the parameter to the command, and whether the command requires you to wait till the TNC resets. Okay, so it's very simple. Each line has a command name, what the command parameters are, followed by a comma, followed by whether you want to wait till the TNC resets after you apply the command. That's it. Nothing fancy. I've added some provisions for variables. So if you want to set the day and time on your TNC, you can use an inbuilt, again, I parse that. So if it's $date time, I set the current date time to the TNC, okay? So, so it's very straightforward, simple stuff. These would be the commands that you would normally enter on the TNC terminal, right? So, for example, if you say date time, it shows you the current date time that's set in TNC. Because we did a factory reset, it went ahead and reset the date time. So, for example, if you say digipeat, it's currently on, you can say digipeat off. Okay, so basically you create a file and save the file as your config file, right? That's it. And if you have a comment, you can add a comment and just pre-text that with a £, and we should be good. All right, so that's my text file. Now let's go back to this tool I just wrote. I'm gonna pick so let's go back to the tool, pick the config file that we just created. So that'll be that. And then let's say load config. So what it did was took your text file and then laid it out for you nicely so you can visually see it. So the first command in the text file was echo, and the parameter was on. You don't have to wait till it's you don't have to wait for the TNC to reset. However, if you issue a command reset, yeah, you need to wait for that, right? So here's the daytime with the variable provision. Now, if a command requires a reset from the config file, that'll be colored with the red 4 color. Okay, so let me give you another example here. So for example, here page log is a command, and if you set a value to it, that requires a TNC to reset. So you gotta wait till it finishes resetting. So you get the idea, right? So these are all the settings that I would have otherwise manually entered into my MOBA Xterm one by one. So anyway, so I just got this loaded. I will select my port where my TNC is plugged into my PC, which is COM12. And now I just say process. It goes through this list one by one and then sends a command to the TNC. And if it requires a wait for it to reset, it'll wait 5 seconds before proceeding to the next line. Okay, so it's as simple as that. So let's go through this and let's hit process. All right, so just so you know, if you go back here, let's go do another quick display. You don't see anything in there. It's just clean slate because we just did a factory reset. I'm going to go back now and hit process. Okay, that's because, very simple, because I have the MOBA Xterm open. I'm going to close that. And let's go back in here. Let's do process. Okay, so now it's writing. It's also displaying the output from the TNC. Now it's waiting on the reset to finish. It's waiting 5 seconds. There did a refresh. Let's see if there is another refresh coming up here. And if there is a refresh, it'll wait another 5 seconds. As you can tell, it's processing one at a time. So it just issued a page log 5 and it's waiting for it to reset. And then next line. So now it just goes through this whole thing in a matter of less than a minute. And it saves me a ton of time. And the best part is I can make any changes I want to make in my text file and then just load the text file, my config file, and have it rerun. It's as simple as that. Okay. So it's going through various settings now. Num nodes also requires a reset, so it's waiting for reset. That's it. I'm done. So it only took me less than a minute to run these 60 or so lines of code. or config settings in my TNC, which would have taken me maybe 15, 20, sometimes 30 minutes. So you can feel free to download. I'll provide a link to this tool in my description. Feel free to download and let me know if you have any feedback or questions. The tool is built on C#, which means you need to have a .NET runtime. On the right here is an ad hoc command line tool. So if I say port 12, I'll open it first and I'll issue a my call. Let's do a send. It basically displays the my call. So whatever command you have, so let's say if you did help as an example, it'll display help, right? Nothing fancy. So if you want to just quickly test a command or see what it does, let's say a date time. I know I just set a date time. It set the date time to today when we ran the config settings earlier, so that's good. Anyway, so that's just a quick rundown of the demo for this tool. I'll prepare a similar tool, not the same UI, for Raspberry Pi. With Raspberry Pi, it'll probably be a command line tool, not so much a UI based tool. So and I should have that ready. I'm actually very close to being done with that too, so I'll probably upload that tool also. All right, thanks for watching, and we'll talk soon.